Good morning, everyone. Welcome to UUCC, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. We are a group of spiritual freethinkers who gather to celebrate life, build community, and better the world. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. I'm Kevin House, your worship associate for this morning, and the service today is being led by a minister, Eileen Casey-Campbell. This service is also being live streamed to our YouTube channel. We will plan on continuing with this hybrid worship service throughout the church year. So you can join us each week here in person, on Zoom, or later on YouTube, as you prefer. If this is your first visit, welcome. We invite you to sign the visitor's book in the entryway. And whether it's your first visit or your 100th, we're glad that you came. I have a few announcements to share with you today. Please wear a mask. Masks are available for anyone who forgot one. RE and childcare will be provided this morning by Pat and Kaya Mells. We will be collecting the cards for joys and sorrows after our first hymn. Please fill them out or type into the chat box on Zoom if you have something you would like to share. We would like to share with you a video provided by UUSC to introduce the second of this year's guests from the Guest at Your Table program. We will also include a short video to introduce two more guests over the next 2 weeks during the announcement section of our service.
So my name is Joel Szekérek, and I'm a senior legal officer of the Hungarian Helsinki Committee. I work in the refugee program. And the Hungarian Helsinki Committee is the largest and oldest organization in Hungary, which, and in fact, the only organization in Hungary which provides legal assistance and representation for asylum seekers and refugees who come seeking Hungary's help in providing them with refuge when they fear persecution, serious harm, war, or other atrocities against human rights. And we provide in-person and individualized counseling and legal representation for asylum seekers and migrants. And with regard to the war in Ukraine now, the Hungarian Helsinki Committee is also, of course, in the forefront of the response. We work together closely with UNHCR, which we have been cooperating with for the past 20 plus years. We are the implementing partner of UNHCR in Hungary. We conducted nearly 60 monitoring visits at this point to a number of facilities all over the country, provided nearly 6,000 individuals with legal counseling, with information. We train professionals and volunteers, first responders, and provide information which is key to those who seek our help. The war in Ukraine was quite transformative for a number of reasons. I mean, first, there is a war right next door in a neighboring country, which really changed the dynamic and the social composition of the people fleeing to Hungary. Hungary became a first country of arrival for people fleeing directly from a war-torn country. Before that,
If you are here with us in person today, you can take a box or envelope home with you and give it a place at your table or another central spot in your home to remind you to add what you can donate to the program over the next few weeks. Bring the box or envelope back to church on Sunday, December 18, or send your donation directly to UUSC online at uusc.org/give-to-guest, or by mailing a check to UUSC with guest or GAYT in the memo field and send it to UUSC, P.O. Box 808, Newark, New Jersey, 07101-0808. If you are joining us today on Zoom or later on YouTube and would like donation materials or a brochure introducing our guests delivered to you home, you can contact Danielle Lyon at danielle.a.lyon@gmail.com. Are there any other announcements for the good of the community?
Yes. Thanks, Kevin. I have a couple announcements to share this morning. The first is that this morning we are hosting after the service a UU 101 gathering, which some of you have emailed about back and forth with me. But if this is the first time you're hearing it and you're a newcomer or even a longtime comer who takes their time to decide about things, you are invited. If you are thinking about what the heck is Unitarian Universalism anyway, how does this community fit into my spiritual journey? What is the mission and vision of this church? You are invited. We will gather for about an hour, no longer than an hour, in the religious education room. So if you have kids, they are welcome to come and play with the toys there after the service while we gather. And we will have a fairly casual conversation around UU 101. The next announcement is that next weekend, we have Gwendolyn Olton as our guest preacher. She is the director of the MK Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence in Rochester. And she has offered to do a roundtable discussion after the service for us on healthy communication patterns for communities. So our potluck after the service next week will include this roundtable discussion with Gwendolyn Olton, facilitated by Gwendolyn Olton, and we will have childcare during that time. Kaya is going to stay with us. So if you bring your kids, they will be able to play downstairs or eat downstairs while we have a roundtable discussion about healthy communications. And finally, because December is a very busy month, lots of things are happening. I want to let you know, you may have already noticed December 25th, Christmas is a Sunday. Our Christmas service this year is all online, and it will be up on our YouTube channel starting December 24th, the evening of Christmas Eve. So there will be no in-person service on Christmas morning, even though it's a Sunday. It'll be all online, and you can find it on YouTube starting Christmas Eve.
I'd like to invite Sue Underhill, representing our service partner for the darkness season, to come forward and share some information about Light Hill.
Good morning. I see some familiar faces out there and many that I do not know, but I am Sue Underhill, and I have the privilege of being the executive director of Light Hill. We are a 2-bed end-of-life care home on Parish Street Extension in Canandaigua. And our home is beautiful, but our Light Hill family of volunteers and staff is more beautiful. We have the privilege of bringing in up to 2 residents at a time that are terminally ill. We help those residents and their families to try to create memories, to try to live life fully until that transition to death. And so our home, many people think of Light Hill and comfort care homes and hospice. They dwell on the thought of death. But it's truly about stepping into an environment that allows you to live fully until that second of transition to death. We create memories. Families gather in that space because it's such a welcoming environment. Families are allowed to spend the night in their own room upstairs in our home. I have an extra room for each of the families when their loved one is sleeping downstairs. They can be in the house, spending time and staying with us. Our home is a nonprofit, so everything that goes into our home is solely through volunteers giving their time for people willing to financially support us. It is through donations, it is through fundraising, it is through memorial gifts and grants. That's how we are funded and that is how we function. Volunteers are critical to our home. I could be there 24 hours a day and not manage that home. It is the volunteers, it is community people that step forward to give their love and share their hearts with our residents and their families. The energy in Light Hill is really wonderful. And I think, Nancy, I can put you on the spot a little bit to share what you think about the energy in our home. How does that feel?
All I can tell you is whatever's going on in my life at the time when I go spend a few hours with Light Hill with the families that are there, everything turns around for me. And I come home feeling lighter, and people say, how can you do that kind of work? And you must get that question too all the time. It is so fulfilling. It is so warm. As a volunteer, you get so much incredible support there from Susie and the other staff people that you don't feel like you're doing it without all the support you need. And thank you, Susie.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Nancy. We do a couple of major fundraisers a year right now. In the spring, we have a flower bouquet sale, and those flowers are really beautiful. It's always the first Monday of March that we end up delivering those flowers to folks that help support that fundraiser. And then in the fall, I'm hoping that some of you got to see it. We have a really beautiful luminaria event down at Kershaw Park. And that event, people will purchase a luminaria and the Light Hill staff will actually create that luminaria. And then we line the walkway at Kershaw Park in the evening. And that is in November, because November is Hospice and Palliative Care Month. And so people come and they stroll and they find their loved one's name, either in honor of or in memory of. And it truly is a spiritual experience. It's another way to connect and to remember those loved ones that have transitioned before us. Our home has been in existence since open and operating since 2016. It took us 2 years before that to renovate and remodel our home to make it work for the 2-bed end-of-life care home. And that home was gifted to us by our community. And one community member actually gifted us a check to purchase the home and property. Other community members gifted us financial support to be able to renovate that home. So we are constantly trying to figure out how to keep moving forward. We're doing okay at this point in time, but to encourage people to think about Light Hill, to come and visit Light Hill, to see it. When you come to visit Light Hill, you'll find out that when you step through those doors, you actually experience Light Hill. It isn't just an in and out visit. You actually feel the energy in that home. That's so wonderful. And I am so thankful and feel really privileged to be the director, to meet the volunteers that come in and want to be with us. We give them a training, one-on-one training, and then there is classroom training, 21 hours of classroom training on end of life in the different areas of end of life. Introduction to hospice, introduction to communication techniques, to symptom management, to managing grief, to family dynamics, to spirituality, and for veterans at end of life, because that can be a different scenario for many of them. So our volunteers, I think, really get a strong base, and then they have additional support when they are in the home. The shifts are 4 hours each, and oftentimes, if I have 2 residents in the home, we're having 2 volunteers on those shifts. And then I am on call Monday through Friday, and I have on call RNs on the weekend to cover for me as well. So there is always a backup support in our home. But I want to thank you for inviting me here to help you have a little bit more understanding of Light Hill if you weren't aware of us before. So thank you very much. There are some pamphlets in the back and a couple of business cards if anybody is interested in picking those up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. As we prepare to be fully together, I remind you to silence your phones and the devices. We now enter a space of worship. I invite you to join with me in our chalice lighting words as the flame is lit. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, weakness and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Good morning. So I grew up Catholic, as some of you know, and I also grew up in a very leftist family. We were devout Catholics and we were extremely leftist. So some of you I know just came from Thanksgiving dinner tables where there is tense political divides across the table. And the tense political conversations that happen around my family's Thanksgiving table are around whether someone is correctly interpreting Marx, or whether anarcho-collectivism or party-style communism are the best strategies to change the world. That's the kind of family I grew up in. And my mother was always very vocal about how her leftist politics differed from some of the doctrines of our church. But one thing she never talked about was abortion. She never mentioned it because we're not supposed to mention it, right? So she never said a thing about it. And the lessons I learned about abortion came from church doctrine. I assumed because we were quiet about it at home that whatever the church taught me was correct. Those were our values too. And then when I was 13 or 14, I remember I was hanging out in my kitchen, sort of leaning against the kitchen counter, making snacks with a friend of mine whose family was possibly more leftist than ours, talking about politics casually like 13-year-olds do in normal families. And the friend mentioned reproductive freedom. And I said, surely you don't mean abortion as freedom. we're pro-life in this family. And my mom was walking past and stopped in her tracks, and I could see in her face a sudden regret in never having mentioned this topic to me. And she said, "No, we're not all of us." And I said, "What do you mean? This is what the church teaches." And she said, "Oh, I'm starting to regret never teaching you anything myself on this, but I believe in a world where every child has the right to be wanted and loved. That's what I believe. And I believe in a world where every person has the right to decide what happens to their bodies. And I'm sorry I never said that to you before now." And everything I thought I knew about life and about choice and about abortion started to unravel that day when she finally spoke out loud what her true values are. And I think this is why we come to church. This is why we come to this church anyway, because here we strive to build a community where we are challenged to say what our heart's beliefs are, where we are challenged to speak out loud even the things that are hard to speak about, where we are challenged to stand in our values and tell the world about them, even if the world says we aren't supposed to talk about them. So I'm glad to be in church with you all this morning where we can talk about these things. And I invite you now to rise in body or in spirit here or at home. And on this second Sunday of Advent, let's sing an Advent hymn, number 226 in your hymnal, "People Look East." We are a community that holds one another in our joys and in our sorrows, in our celebrations and in our pain. We say to one another, "We are with you." So I invite you, if you have joys or sorrows to share with us this morning, if you have something sitting on your heart today, to write it down on the slips of paper you'll find in your seats, or to type it into the chat on Zoom and lift it up. As the basket comes around, you can pass the paper forward. You can type joys or sorrows into the chat at any time. Are there joys and sorrows to share today? And now it's time for a story. And I notice we don't have any of our big sibling kids with us today, but maybe some of you grown-ups are big siblings or parents. And so I'm going to ask for your help. I want to know, have you ever had a new baby come into your family? Yeah, some of us have. Some of those babies are here. And so in the time before a new baby comes to a family, there's a long wait, sometimes very sudden if you come by adoption or foster care. But when a baby is born into a family, there's usually a long wait. And we have entered a season of church called Advent, where Christians wait for Christmas to come, which maybe you know is a story about a new baby coming into a family. And Advent is the long wait, where we get ready, we do the things to prepare for the celebration that comes at the end of a long wait. And it's a time when we think about what kind of world we would want for a sweet, vulnerable, precious baby. And we work to prepare that world to be ready for every baby. It's a time when we let the newness of a baby remind us how special and holy our own bodies are. And Advent starts with a story. The story goes like this. There was a young woman in Galilee in a town called Nazareth, and her name was Mary. One day, a messenger of God came to Mary and told her, "You are beloved, and God is with you." She was, like most of us probably would be, pretty confused. But the messenger said, as the messengers of God in the Bible always do, "Do not be afraid. You are chosen. The Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will have a child, a son, and the son will be a new king like King David of old." Again, Mary was confused. She was like, "Who, me? Can't be me. I'm nobody. I'm not even married." But the messenger assured her that yes, she was beloved and chosen, and that nothing she imagined was impossible. So she thought about it. And she said yes. And then she sang this song of joy and hope for her new baby. And this is what the story says that she sang. "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, for he has looked with favor on the lowly state of his servant. Surely from now on, all generations will call me blessed. For the mighty one has done great things for me, and holy is God's name. Indeed, God's mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things to eat and sent the rich away empty. He has come to the aid of his children in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to all his descendants forever." And this is the end of our story.
Now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts of both time and money support our church in its work. Each week, we would like to spotlight a group or committee and thank them for their gift of time and invite others who are interested to join them in supporting our church and programs. This week, the group is the Hospitality Committee, and people interested in finding out more can contact Jeannie Smith. 1/4 of our plate collection for the darkness season goes to Light Hill, an organization that provides loving, compassionate, specialized care for those who are terminally ill and for their families and loved ones. You can give to this morning's offering by placing cash or a check into the basket, or if you are joining us from home by visiting canandaigua.uu.org/connection/donate, or by mailing a check to UUCC at 3024 Cooley Road, Canandaigua, 14424. In either case, make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering. We now gratefully accept the offering.
We lift up the joys and sorrows that we hold in our hearts. And as we share the feelings deep within us, we tell one another, we are with you. Here is what we're holding this morning. We lift up prayers for Ken's sister, Sharon, who is in the hospital. We share our joy in nature this morning and rejoice with Carrie after her trip to Egypt with her mom, fulfilling her mom's dreams. For these and all the joys and sorrows left in the silence of our hearts, I ask Kevin to drop a stone, and we say to one another, we are with you. Say it with me. We are with you. I want to invite you now into a time of meditation and centering, followed by some shared silence. So get comfortable in your seat. Maybe take a deep breath and let your shoulders fall away from your ears. Perhaps your eyes fall closed as we listen more closely in this time to the sounds of life. The birds in the trees outside, the cars driving past, the breath of our neighbor, the wiggles and giggles of our children, the beating of our own hearts. I never heard the word abortion in church when I was a child. So many Sundays I listened to cis men who tried not to come within 10 feet of a uterus, who had themselves made a choice, a vow, to parent no children, preach from the towering pulpit about protecting life. And they didn't say the word, but we all knew whose lives they meant to defend. I read in the weekly bulletin editorials demanding respect for the unborn, written by the Knights of Columbus. Yes, that same Columbus who wrenched nursing babies away from their mothers with his own hands. And we didn't say abortion, but we said his name. I heard about the valiant fight against the tyranny of someone named Roe or Wade. I never was sure who my enemy was supposed to be, but we passed the basket for special collections to battle them. Battle we did from our pulpit and our pews and our publications. And downstairs in the church kitchen, I never heard anyone say abortion, but I did hear the mothers whisper to one another about which doctor to call. I heard the organist offer rides to a clinic far enough away not to be seen by the prying eyes of God or whoever else. I saw aunties quietly slip round sleeves of pills into teenagers' shaky hands. And in the Sunday school hallway, they took up collections of their own sort to pay for a nameless procedure for Mary Teresa or Mary Angela or Mary Elizabeth or someone inevitably named for that single unmarried mother who made her own choice. No one said the word abortion in the hallowed halls or the dingy basement of my church, but everybody knew about them, needed them, got them. And even as we descend into that dim reality of having to slip each other cash in secret, traffic one another over borders, break laws and vows and bodies, I know as long as the people of this church let me stand in this place, I sure as hell will never stop saying it here. Amen. As we enter this season of Advent, which some of us celebrate and some of us don't, the question on my mind is, did Mary make a choice? And look, I know the nativity story that Luke wrote, which became gospel, which became Charlie Brown's Christmas special, is likely fiction. Jesus was a real person who was born somehow, but Luke, writing 150 years after his death, was writing a story. And stories matter. The stories we tell matter. So in the story that we have carried for so long, did Mary have a choice? Did she have a choice to make? And I think the story tries to make clear that she did. We know now what Luke's original readers would have known, which is that birth control and pharmacological abortions were widespread in the first century Mediterranean usage. The pregnancy preventing herb silphium was so popular across the Roman Empire that it was harvested to extinction. And the name for the common abortifacient herb balm of Gilead came to be a metaphor for a universal cure-all, such that it is the title of a hymn in our hymnal. Just to drive the point home that yes, Mary had a choice and made a choice, Luke has her declare her affirmation of her pregnancy in a 9-verse song. Choosing a pregnancy isn't modern or new. Ending a pregnancy isn't modern or new. The only thing new and modern about reproductive choice is that we aren't supposed to talk about it. We aren't supposed to talk about abortion. We drop stones in joys and sorrows for our gallbladder surgeries and pray for our sister's radiation treatment in church and post on social media when that double line shows up on our COVID test. But abortion, we don't talk about that healthcare. Maybe we assume, because we see the line of Priuses with blue wave and coexist stickers in the parking lot, that we know one another's opinions on abortion, but we don't discuss them. We, all of us, love someone who's had an abortion. Several someones, statistically, probably. But if that someone isn't you, personally, you may not be able to name them because we're not supposed to talk about it. And I think we need to change that. I think we need to stop in this season of underground, burying our thoughts about abortion underground, and take a loud moral stance as a religious community. I have, in the last few months, had to hold myself to account, because you had better believe anti-choice pastors are preaching about abortion. They have been for 50 years or more. You had better believe parents in the religious right wing talk about abortion from a religious standpoint with their children. Even the politicians who, over the course of my entire life, have had anything to say about abortion, say it with religious fervor behind them. The left has considered it law and taboo discussion for a long time now. When we make reproductive justice unmentionable, especially in our religious communities, we yield the entire conversation to those who claim their faith requires the control and subjugation of others' bodies. When religious people, myself included, fail to talk about abortion as a religious issue for us, we allow the rhetoric to become that the religious stance is anti-choice. In reality, that is just one statistically uncommon, misguided religious perspective. The issue of abortion is not one of secular versus religious. My religion's first guiding principle is the inherent worth and dignity of all persons. The right of every person to decide what happens to their own body, to make decisions, yeah, preach it, to make decisions for themselves about their own health is fundamental to my faith. Reproductive choice, like our other embodied choices, is holy. This is a religious value. It is, if you ask me, a biblical value. The freedom of bodily autonomy is sacred to us. And it's time, I think, that we start saying so in our homes and in our streets and in our pulpits. You all sent me to Oregon for the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly this past June. And I was there in a room with nearly 1,000 other UUs when we heard the news of the judicial precedent set by Roe v. Wade being overturned. I watched our UUA president, Susan Frederick Gray, weep as she told us the news. And then I saw how, in a matter of hours, the gathering composed a faith statement on reproductive justice that centered our beliefs in a call for actual religious freedom on this issue. I want to read you some of what we affirmed that day. Our Unitarian Universalist faith affirms that all our bodies are sacred, and that we are each endowed with the twin gifts of agency and conscience. Each of us should have the power to decide what does and doesn't happen to our bodies at every moment of our lives, because consent and self-determination are holy. In the words of Sister Song, the Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective, we unequivocally support every person's right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, to have children, to not have children, to parent children in safe and sustainable communities. Disparities in resources or freedoms make it difficult for certain groups of people to exercise autonomy over their own bodies. Although the legal right to abortion had been present, there had not been sufficient consistent access to these services. BIPOC, people of low financial resources, those with disabilities, and those in the LGBTQI+ communities are most harmed by legal and systemic barriers to comprehensive reproductive health care. Our faith compels us to take liberatory action in response to oppression. Controlling people's bodies during pregnancy is about enforcing white supremacy, patriarchy, and ruling class power. The statement goes on to call congregations toward organizing, advocating politically, building networks of support, both above ground and below, fundraising, educating, and bearing public witness of our faith-based commitment to reproductive freedom. And listen, I know there are some folks here today who feel conflicted about the idea of abortion. You don't have to believe abortion is always a virtuous choice to be celebrated, to be a UU. This is a faith with room for your conflicted feelings. Abortion is a morally complex choice, and you get to have complex feelings and beliefs about it. What our faith does require of us is to trust pregnant people to make morally complex choices around their own bodies. To trust that a pregnant person is in fact the best person to make those morally complex choices. And so it maybe feels like Advent is an odd season to choose to talk about reproductive freedom, the season of expecting a longed for beloved baby. But reproductive freedom means not just the freedom to choose not to have children, but also the freedom to choose to have a child, even if you're single, even if you're a teenager, even if you're poor, even if you're struggling to survive under the oppressive regime of the Roman Empire. I remember being newly pregnant myself, not single, poor, or a teenager. I was in the first weeks of a planned for, hoped for, very much wanted pregnancy, and found myself draped over the public toilet at work for about the 10th time that morning, reeling with the most common, mundane, benign symptom of early pregnancy, thinking to myself, no one should be forced to do this. And over the course of my 2 loved and longed for pregnancies, I sacrificed my body in ways I didn't even know I could. And nothing could make me more pro-choice than those 2 chosen children, because no one should be forced to do that. And I finally understand what my mother was saying to me when I was a teenager. No one deserves to be born unwanted either. The religious value that she was claiming and that Mary claimed in her declaration of choice in the Magnificat, that song she sings at the end of the passage in Luke, is a dream of a world that is worthy of our children. And it runs parallel to the value of choice, of bodily freedom for every person. And it is the absence of this value that makes the religious claims of anti-choice faith groups so flimsy. Because they demand a child be born, a body sacrificed, but not a world worthy of the child to meet the sacrifice. There are no equivalent demands that a child be fed, that a child be housed, that a child be clothed, educated, safe from violence. There is no vision of a world worthy of the sacrifice of birth. But every pregnant person who chooses birth dreams of such a world. The sacred texts that are misused to prop up the anti-choice agendas dream of such a world. Mary, in our story today, chooses birth and says immediately that the world worthy of her sacrifice is one where the proud are scattered, the powerful brought down from their thrones, and the poor lifted up, the hungry fed, and the rich sent away. And if we really wanted to stop abortions, instead of to control pregnant people's bodies, we know how to do that. We have excellent data on exactly what causes pregnant people to choose birth. And Mary's song is pretty spot on, actually. There are 5 factors in a society that can significantly reduce abortion rates, and they are a comprehensive sex education, access to free or affordable healthcare, access to free or affordable childcare, access to free or affordable birth control, and access to free or affordable higher education, especially for people with the capacity for pregnancy. Mary had it in this text. Offer a world where power and resources are dispersed, not concentrated among the few, and people will choose birth. Societies that have all these elements have negligible abortion rates, that is, rates consistent with only abortions that are medically necessary. That's the world we dream of. But what can we do today? Well, we can join Michelle Prosh-Newman and other members of our social justice team raising awareness in Atwater Park on Saturday mornings. We can call our federal representatives and ask them to codify reproductive justice in law, and make sure our state representatives know about our continued support of state abortion protections. We can educate ourselves on self-managed abortion and support programs like the Reproductive Health Access Project that gets abortion pills by mail to people who may not have access to in-person care. We can give our time or resources toward organizations like Sister Song or the National Network of Abortion Funds, who help people in need of abortion care directly. The full statement from the UU General Assembly, by the way, with a list of these and many other resources, is printed in the kitchen and also available on the UUA website if you're joining us on Zoom. We read the Magnificat today because it is a beautiful text on holy choice. And I think we can be fairly certain the anti-choice pastors preaching this morning are not reading it. They're reading one out of context verse from the book of Jeremiah, a piece of Jewish scripture that somehow has not convinced 100 generations of rabbinic scholars to abandon the Jewish religious value of reproductive choice. This is why we need to talk about abortion in church. Our faith, along with many others, is clear about the parallel values of reproductive freedom and a world worthy of the children we choose to have. The faith groups that only value a cult-like control of certain bodies are leveraging the whole weight of their platforms toward building that world. And we cannot cede the stance of religious authority to them. Advent is a time of hopeful expectation that maybe, just maybe, divinity is embodied in this earth, right alongside us. It includes, wrapped up in this hope, the understanding that bodies are sacred. Divinity embodied means that bodies matter. There is almost nothing more central to our faith than this hope, that justice looks like a world where every body matters. The freedom to choose the sacrifice of one's body for another or not. The care and protection of all the bodies born. This is the religious standpoint our faith holds. And maybe if we live into this hope, we can truly proclaim that every child that is born is a sacred gift, and every night that a child is born is a holy night. May it be so. Amen.
My soul doth magnify the Lord, and my spirit hath rejoiced in God my Savior. For he hath regarded the low estate of his handmaiden. For behold, from henceforth all generations shall call me blessed. For he that is mighty hath done for me great things, and holy is his name. And his mercy is on them that fear him, from generations to generation. He hath showed strength with his arm. He hath scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He hath put down the mighty from their seats, and exalted them of low degree. He hath filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he hath sent empty away. He hath helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, as he spoke to our fathers, to Abraham and to his seed forever. As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
I want to leave you with the words of our denomination's statement of faith. The world we envision includes social, political, legal, and economic systems that support everyone's freedom of reproductive choice and expression of gender identity and sexuality, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized. In such a world, all communities are places of equality, abundance, and safety, free from violence and oppression. Let's rise in body or in spirit and sing together our closing hymn, number 95 in the gray hymnal, There Is More Love Somewhere.
There is more
Please join me in our words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These query in our hearts until we are together again.